N7GES, we're supposed to start a net here. If you, I'll give you guys a chance to at least sign, so I won't interrupt that for you.
N7GES, I say go for it. I didn't realize what time it was. K1DED.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to sign there. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is N7GES, November 7, Golf Echo Sierra, and this is the NCARC TechNet. We meet each week, each Monday evening at this time to discuss generally technical issues in amateur radio and other issues that affect amateur radio. You're welcome to join us and ask questions on the net, either on the 447-275, the 447-750, which is linked, Echolink at W0UPS-R, and our nets are streamed to YouTube for your later perusal as well, or you can probably even ask questions on the comments page in YouTube as well. If you have questions about the net or other things you'd like us to consider covering, suggestions are always welcome. You can email those at Elmers at NCARC.net. I usually cannot get through this with at least one good flub, so I'm holding my record, I guess. Echo, Lima, Mike, Echo, Romeo, Sierra at November, Charlie, Alpha, Romeo, Charlie.net. Believe I got all that correct. If anybody wants to correct that, please feel free later in the net. Let's take some check-ins and see who's here, and then we'll move on to our topics. Who's listening this evening?
K1. Well, let me make sure I'm not getting keyed on. K1DEG. What do you know that?
N0EMP with K0DBE. K0PRB with K0LAO.
K00Y, so Kilo 0 Victor Romeo Yankee.
Kilo Alpha 6 Echo Tango Echo Jim Loveland. W0
KB0 SCX George and Bertha. Whiskey 0 Romeo Delta Charlie W0 RDC Rob Al Canyon.
Kilo Echo 0 Tango Mike Delta Ryan and Loveland.
Kilo Echo 0 Oscar X-Ray Victor Scott and Fort Collins.
Okay. Stop and catch up a little bit here. I did have a few doubles. KE0OXV, K5, KE0TMD, W0RDC. Rob, we were wondering about you today and if everything was okay. KB0SCX, George, long time no hear. It's good to hear you. KA6ETE, K0VRY, we had a double around there. K0LAO, K0PRB, K0DBE, N0EMP, K1DEG. Yes, I did know that. but thanks for the info. We had at least a couple of doubles there. Come again, anybody I didn't catch?
KE0RXF.
K0VRY, Kilo 0, Victor Romeo Yankee. Sorry, I was in a drive-thru, so I don't know if you caught me or not.
Okay. W0USC, I think you were one of the ones I missed, and KE0RXF, you also, Randy, thank you. VRY, yes, I caught you both times, and I did acknowledge you, but that's probably when you were in the drive-thru. Thank you much. Anybody else this evening before we begin?
This is Alpha Echo 0, Charlie Foxtrot, Ben, Wilhound.
Okay. EE0CF, thank you, and welcome, Ben. Thank you very much. Okay, check-ins can be taken at any time. I just take them for to see who's here, but if you didn't check in now, you're still welcome to check in at any time, so please feel free. Okay, so tonight, tower safety. Crew safety, supplies and preparations, supplies, gear, practices, all of those sorts of things. We've not discussed this before on this net, and it's probably very appropriate to touch on some of these subjects. I hope we have, I know that we have at least a few experienced tower people on the net tonight, so I'll be anxious to hear from them. But it is definitely something to be taken very, very, very seriously. I was going to read a part of an email that I got from somebody on a couple of incidents, but I was going to paraphrase it a bit and did not get time to do that. Essentially, a non-ham using someone's tower to climb up and fix their router for internet, and without the right shoes, lost his grip and fell and ended up hurting himself very badly. And another ham who came over and said, hey, I thought we were only climbing 10 feet and it was actually 30, and oh well, I'll just do this. Not the right shoes or gear, got part way up and was cramping and couldn't move up and down, and one of the other guys that came along was failed to eat breakfast and was short on having trouble with the sugar, and so the guy thought he was going to have to call the ambulance for 2 different people, but they got out of it, managed to get done and get down without getting the tower work done. So, an accident that could have been bad that wasn't, and another that was extremely bad. So let's talk about this a little bit. Would anybody like to start? And if I don't get any volunteers, I have at least one person I know of that I'll holler at, and maybe others. Okay. Greg, could I bug you to start with a little bit of advice or equipment or ground crew supplies or knowledge needed or whatever you might know of here that you'd like to offer to us?
Hey, Kevin, I've got a few thoughts. Not an expert on tower climbing by any stretch of the imagination. I started doing some occasional tower climbing probably about 4 years ago, both to help out with the club and also to help some hams that had their own towers. A few things I would say is there's lots of areas in this hobby where we cut corners and buy cheap stuff. This shouldn't be one of those areas. You shouldn't cut corners on your equipment, your safety equipment for tower climbing. You should find someone who's an experienced tower climber that knows what they're doing, that can coach you and teach you or mentor you on tower climbing. You should know your own limitations, like you kind of alluded to already. I don't really like climbing over 50 feet, even though it's a psychological thing, because if you fall 50 feet or 70 feet or 170 feet, it doesn't really make a difference. But, so I'm good for about 50 feet on a solid tower that doesn't shake, and that's it. Don't push yourself beyond what you're comfortable with. Again, have the right equipment. I would say before a climb, first of all, never climb solo. Have another climber, not just another person, but another climber, another experienced climber with you that can help you if there's a problem. Know ahead of time how to call in emergency services and where you are, and if it's at a major street address, that's fine. But if you're in the middle of nowhere, know the GPS coordinates ahead of time and have them written down of where you are in case you need to call for help. I'm going to reset this. Have a ground crew that knows what they're doing. That's really important. Typically, if you're going to be moving heavy equipment, you climb the tower and run a rope line, and the people on the ground do the heavy lifting. They're pulling stuff up and lowering stuff for you. Make sure they have an idea of what they're doing. Make sure they have the right safety equipment. If you're 100 feet up the tower and you drop something like a wrench and it falls 90 feet and then it hits the edge of a rung, it can shoot out 90 feet laterally. So the people on the ground need to have headgear, helmets, things like that, and know what some of the hazards of being on the ground near a tower climb are. Don't be at the base of the tower when there's climbers up there if you don't have to be. Those are my thoughts, N0EMP.
Okay, thanks, Greg. That's I know already a good list. Others would like to add anything to that?
LAO?
LAO, go ahead.
Well, any dangerous situation that you can potentially have injuries, you should have at least one Red Cross certified in first aid, and you should have a med kit. That way it's a stopgap until if something disastrous happens, you can at least prep them until emergency services can get there.
Okay, very good. Very good. Anybody else on net actually done, besides Greg, done any tower work and, have any experience they can relate to us. Oh, Greg, you might be it. I don't know. At this point, I intended to email and try to get some other folks on here, and it did not happen. Golly, life's busy, crazy busy. Greg, can you talk to us a little bit about safety equipment? You mentioned helmets. Any other? I know there's various support belts and things like that, but I really don't know much about them. There might be others that don't either. Can you give us some ideas of what there is and what sorts of things to be careful of?
Well, I could probably expand a little bit on what I meant earlier when I said get some advice from an expert tower climber. There's been some evolution in safety equipment over the years, and by years there I mean decades. I know a couple of old-timers that climb towers with just a belt that goes around the tower. That's their only piece of safety equipment. And it's like you see the linemen climbing the phone poles, and they just have this leather belt that goes around, it's hooked at their waist, and it goes around the pole. And as they climb, they lean back, and the belt kind of binds on the surface of the tower. And they climb with just that. And when they get to a point where there's guy lines, if it's a guide tower, they unhook the belt and climb up another step with no safety equipment at all that's in play, and then they reattach the belt by throwing it one-handed around the tower, taking one of their hands off the tower, and reattach it and continue climbing. I've seen people do that, and I just shut my eyes and go, oh God, please don't die in front of me. So I wouldn't use that anymore as my safety gear, or at least my primary safety gear. Now you have people wearing a full harness, which is what I do, what all the newer climbers are doing, and all the commercial climbers on commercial towers. You have a harness, you have at least one thing attached to the tower at all times. So if you have two rebar hooks, they're called, which is a spring-loaded safety hook that attaches clamps on, you never have them both disconnected at the same time. You climb a ways with one, you move the other up ahead of you, and then you move the second one. So you always have at least one thing clipped on at all times on the tower. You want to have 2 feet and 2 hands. You want at least 3 of those 4 things on the tower at any one time until you're locked into a work site. There are fall arresters now. If you fall 10 feet, or if you fall 5 feet on a harness, and then you hit the end of your rope, and there's no give, you can be critically injured. There are safety fall arrest gear, which is like stitched webbing that unstitches as it takes a load to decelerate you without a sudden shock. That's an important part of modern climbing gear. I'm going to reset this. So typically you're climbing at least with that arresting gear, 2 pieces of it with 2 hooks, one move one at a time. You climb up to where you're going to work. I use that plus a belt with a clip that I clip onto the tower as I move up because I'm a chicken and I like to be really locked in. Then when you get to your work point, you got to have both hands free to really do any kind of work. So you lock in some anchoring that's usually attached near your waist or near your center of gravity to allow you to lean back, supporting the weight on your legs so you don't get fatigued. And I have both hands free to do work. The other nice piece of gear is a bow fang to communicate with the ground, because they're really cheap, and if you drop one, like I've seen 2 people do, it's not a big loss. M0 EMP.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. And yes, certainly things have changed a lot over the years. I'm writing. Thank you very much. Anybody else have comments to add to this, if you've had any experience?
One DEG.
DEG, go ahead.
I personally have not had any experience climbing towers, but when I was younger, as I say, younger, I had a job once where I had to put up 40-foot pallet racks without any climbing gear, and we had to climb to the top of them. But anyway, that was like when I was 21. Now I know better. I've been on the industrial sites, and usually their rules seems to jive with my idea of being safe. We use a 5-foot lanyard, or I guess that's what you call it, that has the arresting portion of the lanyard rated for your weight. But attached to that lanyard on your back is what we call a yo-yo. And that yo-yo, what it does is when it notices that you are falling or gets attention from that lanyard, it'll start slowing your momentum down before you impact whatever you're going to impact. And they're only rated at so many pounds and so length. You know, they've got ratings on them.
Okay, so that's a type of fall arrestor like Greg was talking about apparently. And I suppose they're also, yeah, they're rated by weight, and they'd have to be rated by weight and probably well, I don't know. Is it distance involved or just the weight rating?
Kevin, I honestly don't remember. It's been a while since I've had to deal with one. Because I'm a big boy, I try to avoid climbing or needing one. But if I have to, I'm definitely going to use one. I think they're rated by length and weight, because I knew they had to give me a pretty big one. Sometimes I've actually used 2. K1DEG.
Okay, very good. This is N7GES, and this is the NCARC TechNet. Anybody have questions for any of us on the net that we might be able to answer regarding this?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if all the towers are actually rated, sort of like ladders are, and I'm kind of worried, like if there's like the easy point is if someone had a homemade tower and they designed it, assembled it incorrectly or something like that, and have the whole tower fall down on you, or are we assuming that these are all professionally made towers that were professionally built that will collapse with a person's weight on them?
So I'm let me just see if I understand your question. You're asking if we're assuming that these are professional towers and not something home built, or you also mentioned ratings. Are you asking if towers are rated for climbing climbing abilities?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I guess. I mean, normally they the tower would need to just hold itself up, and whatever like communications gear it needs to be put on there. There definitely needs to be someone who would need to climb up there once in a while. And I'm just curious if there's actually a rating to make sure that so and so many pounds person can climb up like a ladder. Like ladders actually have a class 1, class 2, class 3 type ladder that will guarantee that it should hold up this many pounds person climbing up.
Okay. That's a good question. Anybody have any info on that? I certainly never heard of anything like that, but I'm not sure I would know. I think mostly towers are rated for what they can hold and how much they can deal with freestanding or guide or that sort of thing. But anybody ever heard anything about a ladder rated for climbing strength as well as antenna and standing strength?
One DEG. I don't know for sure.
You have some info that you think might provide an answer there?
I think I know, but there was somebody under you that doubled with you. Let them go. Maybe they know more of a definite, because I don't like speaking of things I don't really know, but I've heard and seen, but I don't know particularly. Let the other person go first.
Okay, other station, go again.
EMP.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, the commercial manufacturers, typically U.S. Towers or ROHN, R-O-H-N, they will have ratings on their products. I don't know what those ratings are, but they have different sizes of towers, and their different sizes of towers will have ratings for how high they can be before they need to be guyed, before you have to start putting guy lines on. And they have specs on what the base needs to be. It's usually set in concrete, and they have specs on what that structure has to be. And then they have ratings for wind load and how many square feet of antenna you have on there and what kind of wind it can tolerate, and I'm sure what kind of, how many climbers can be on it or how many pounds of climbers can be on it. But that whole discussion reminded me of one other point, which is if you're going to go climb somebody else's tower, like you're helping somebody out or something like that, when you get there, take a good look at the tower, give it a good shake. If it's guyed, go around to all the guy lines and put your whole full weight of your body on the guy lines. Give them a really good pull and look and see, are they saggy, are they droopy, are they snug? Do they come out of the ground when you pull on them? And make your own decision about whether or not you're going to climb this tower. And if you think the tower is unsafe, due to deterioration or improper installation or anything, if you think it's an unsafe tower, don't climb it. Tell them, sorry, I can't help you out. And 0 EMP.
PRB.
PRB, go ahead.
Yeah, Greg, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but aren't there certain specs for the tension of guy lines?
There are, and there's also a tool to measure tension on guy lines. I've heard I've heard the figure 110 pounds floated around. I don't know any ham or any amateur that has that tool. I'm sure the professional climbers do. But, yeah, there's a spec and there's a tool to measure it. But you probably don't have that tool. So, you know, if you walk up there and the thing is loose, that's wrong. But if it's as tight as a piano string, that's probably a little bit too tight. So you learn to look at some towers that are properly installed and check the guy lines on them and make a determination. Is this thing doing any good or isn't it? Or is it really too tight and is it pulling the tower over on one side? So for us, I mean, at my level of training and experience anyway, that's what I go by. But yeah, there's a spec and there's a tool, N0 EMP.
Well, okay, thanks for that information. Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, once you know the spec of a guy line, what it needs to be, then you would have to know what cable can handle that specification as well. That's the way I understand it. Anyway, back to the net. K0PRB.
EMP.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a thing a couple of years ago. We were helping a guy take a bunch of towers down. He had to move. He was on leased property, and his lease wasn't renewed. He had to move, and he had some 100-foot towers up and antennas and arrays and things. And we had to help him out and get stuff down and get stuff moved. And he had some towers that we re-guide because we weren't comfortable with them, and we actually re-guide them, or in some cases used a guy line anchored to a vehicle as a temporary guide just to make it to where we felt we were safe to go up there and take the tower down. So, you know, if you're on a site and there's something you're not happy with, but you can fix it to the point you're happy with it, you know, then it's your call. But if you're comfortable with it, go ahead. So there is that. But we had some towers. There was no way we were going to climb them until we'd actually take one tower down and take the guy wires from that and add it to a second tower and put in new anchor points to make it where we were comfortable to climb the second tower and so on and so forth. And 0 EMP.
Okay, very good. This is N7GES with the NCARC TechNet. Well, Greg, I'm sorry we're putting you to all the work here. Hopefully, if anybody else jumps in here or tunes in late, please feel free to add comments if you have had experience in tower climbing or in ground crew or whatever. Speaking of ground crew, what other is there other equipment that they should have? Certainly, besides helmets and first aid and that sort of thing, is there anything else a climber or a person coming to be ground crew should have, or a person that's providing equipment for ground crew should offer?
I'd say some good gloves to handle ropes with and not burn your hands. Should have one person, like I said earlier, that's on the ground that could climb the tower if they had to in an emergency to help you out if you get into trouble on the tower. And it's nice to have, you know, that you have an amateur on the ground that you can use two-way radios with to communicate so you don't have to shout. And if you have at least one or two people on the ground with prior ground experience, that helps. And then extra volunteers that are there can learn from the folks that have some experience already. And 0 EMP.
N6GN.
Good evening, N6GN. Go ahead.
Nothing really to add. Greg's more code on tower climbing. I don't do it much anymore, but he did
failed to mention something that's applied after the tower is erected, and that would be antenna oil.
Antenna oil.
Yeah, could be Coors, could be Bud, whatever your favorite is.
Okay, gotcha. Well, it does make people feel better and more satisfied to have been asked to work with you, I'm sure. Okay, very good. Anything else anybody has to comment on or ask about regarding all this? Okay, well, I hope we've covered it well enough, and at least for now, do take it very seriously. Do get good instruction and have your equipment and have people around that know what they're up to. And evaluate it carefully before you get into it. Certainly planning before you get up there is going to be very, very important as well. I'm sure that's been sort of mentioned already, but it's worth a reminder as well. Okay, once more, any other comments or questions on this topic?
PRV, LEV.
Okay, we had two. Let me take them in order here. PRV?
Just a quick comment that K0LAO will climb any tower as long as it's no higher than 2 feet tall.
All right. I'll be sure and keep that in mind. Thank you very much. Good evening, Dave. LEV, what have you got for us?
Yeah, once you've installed a tower and things are in place, you have installed a wonderful lightning rod. You might want to discuss precautions on decoupling, disconnecting, surge arresting, so on and so forth, what comes into the house at the base of the tower. We have a lot here in Colorado, lightning in Colorado. I don't have a tower. Didn't take a tower to take damage last summer. Well, 2 summers ago. Anyhow, that's my contribution. Certainly there are a few on here that are more expert at that than I am. W0LEV.
Okay. Thank you, and stick around because other questions will probably come up that you may be able to help with. Well, certainly we all know about proper grounding, both for signal antenna proper functionality, and certainly for lightning as well. We know about protecting our coax with lightning arresting type equipment such as the polyphaser. We know certainly that even with all of that in place, disconnecting lines from equipment and shorting lines and that sort of thing to keep yourself safe. Any other comments anybody wants to add to that without going into an entire program of lightning protection? But very basic considerations with the tower, with your new tower. I wouldn't have thought I'd covered it quite that well, but hearing nothing more there is probably a lot more a person could say. I'm just writing notes here. But certainly those are some basic things a person should consider. And consider that as soon as possible to avoid getting into trouble. Dave, you had, I believe we've talked about this before, but you might just re-relate. You had things disconnected and shorted and whatnot, I assume, and of course lightning protection in the lines probably, and had equipment destroyed just by having lightning come near it. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Most amateurs think direct strike. It doesn't take a direct strike to do damage. There are lots of radiated fields, both magnetic and electromagnetic, that are radiated from a lightning strike. It's basically a very fat, high current conductor. And for instance, the strike that got me, and again, this is not a direct strike, this was about a quarter mile away. Got a laptop, got a nice 20 amp bench power supply. I still haven't fixed the garage door opener. And just because the tower is connected to Earth and possibly with a radial system or several maintained ground rods driven around it and connected with big fat wires, preferably they look like tape, not round conductors, doesn't mean that if the tower gets struck, everything gets shunted to the Earth. You will get induced fields on the coax you need to protect. Best thing is disconnect it. And the best place to disconnect it is the base of the tower. Enough said. W0LEV.
Which, of course, none of us are probably doing, including you, I would imagine, Dave, right?
Yeah, I think while Phil doesn't have a tower at his home, he's done it right. And if anybody wants to know how to decouple and properly shunt as much energy as you can, go visit Phil's installation. That is PRB, W0LEV.
Well, that's a good recommendation there, Phil. That's very good. Okay, other comments? Tower climbing, erection, equipment, that sort of thing that anybody would like to either ask about or give any additional points.
SCX.
Oh, yeah. Hi, George. Go ahead.
I was wondering if there are towers that are considered safer or less risky than others. I'm thinking of fold-over towers or telescoping towers.
Anybody speak to that?
EMP.
EMP?
So a fold-over tower you don't have to climb, so that's pretty safe as long as it doesn't fall on you. So if it's properly installed and maintained and operated, and you stay clear of it while you're lowering it, that's a good safe option. The one thing I know about telescoping towers is you're not supposed to ever climb them when they're extended. Obviously, if they de-telescope while you're on them, you can get parts of your body sheared off, which is never good. So with a telescoping tower, you lower it all the way, and each section is usually 20 foot high, I think, on a typical telescoping tower. So you'll still have a 20-foot climb, but that's a lot better than a 60, 80-foot climb. So you lower it all the way to the ground, so it's not going to move anymore, and then you climb it and do what you got to do. So they're both good options if you use them properly in 0 EMP.
One last comment, W0LEV.
Go ahead, LEV.
Yeah, Phil related Lou Ann's philosophy of no more than 2 feet. That's pretty good. I'll throw in another one because I'm there. I'm 72 years old. When I was a teenager in early 20s and 30s, I took some chances, and my guardian angel, I'm sure, has many, many gray hairs as a result of that and many other things. But consider your dexterity. I would not climb towers anymore, personally. My bones and muscles are 72 years old, and I'm not going there anymore. W0LEV.
Yep, that goes what with know your limits, know your dexterity, know your physical condition. Yeah, good point. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, before Dave or anybody else leaves, I wanted to make a bit of a comment about next week, because I would certainly like to have Dave with us if you can make it. Had several suggestions involving HF and comparing HF and VHF, and especially dealing with noise. Where does HF noise originate? Not just electrical, man-made, but other noise sources. Why is noise more prevalent on HF than VHF frequencies? And why, somewhat related, do rain, fog, and that sort of thing affect VHF and UHF more than HF? I kind of thought we'd cover several of those things at once. And Dave also mentioned S/N minus N. I believe we're talking about signal-to-noise ratios there, correct?
I will do my absolute best to be there next week, or be here next week, Kevin, and I need to go to supper. So, take care. W0LEV.
Okay, I do appreciate it. Enjoy your supper, and we'll put out a bit more information on that on the web. I'll try to remember to get that done tonight so that it's not late. So, do we have any other questions about any amateur radio topic before we complete the net?
Yeah, what's the web page for any more information?
Okay, and we will call this one closed for today. I've already filled you in on next week's to some degree. Interesting stuff there, I think, and some of us know some of this, some of us do not. And it's always a good reminder if we've, since we will have studied some of this for our exams, it's always a good reminder why various things happen with certain frequency ranges. So please do listen in. I will try to make sure and contact a few other folks too, so that we have as much good knowledge available for you as we can get. Thank you again for being here, for offering your questions. I will just repeat one more time that if you have comments about the net or questions about the net or questions you'd like to, ideas of topics you'd like to propose, please email us at elmers@ncarc.net. elmers@ncarc.net. And pose those to us. We'll be happy to have any suggestions, and always happy to try to answer any questions that might arise from these discussions we have every week. Again, thank you very much, 73s, and this is N7GES returning the repeater to normal use.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.